spread out as possible, and we try to keep it based on that time frame that meeting is. So that's the biggest reason why we do it on our end, because we're paying for things as we go along for the trip, so we're having to prepare and plan. So if you definitely need to change any meetings, anything like that, it's totally fine. We just kind of ask that you do it within a week or so of that date, and please feel free to go ahead and post it on there, so that way we'll know that we're all on the same page together. So if you could just post it on your Google Docs, and then if there's something that's completely needs to change and you notice it's going to be a big difference, please let me know. We can always make it an open communication. So I just want to make sure people understand that for sure. Something else that comes up, notice, is leader cost. I know that in the beginning, whenever you're preparing for your trip and you're talking about the cost of your trip to your team, of course you're wondering what is the trip cost for a leader. And that's something that you may know that we definitely make final by the time we purchase the tickets and we pass that information out there. So we want to make sure people have an idea beforehand of how much their trip is going to cost. And I'm going to be working on putting together a little kind of template for you to be able to figure out what the best way to determine it. But a good rule of thumb is to go by is that leaders get 10%, 2 leaders split 10% per person. Am I saying this right? 10% per person for every team member that goes. I think I can say that better. But basically, if you have 2 leaders on a trip, you both are splitting 10% for every person that goes on your trip. That sounds better. So just gives you an idea of it, but also within that, I want to make sure people are not a little bit overwhelmed by that math. So I'm going to be helping people figure out a little bit early on in the process what that means and what your trip costs could roughly look like. So feel free to ask me those questions, but we're going to be putting things together so people will know exactly, roughly what their cost looks like before we actually purchase. Does that make sense? Great. Cool. So something else that we noticed that comes up, Debbie mentioned earlier about the online application. It's a great tool to be able to know exactly what talents, what abilities, giftings that people have that come on the trip. We really, really encourage and actually require people to fill out the missions application before they go on a trip. And really, the best and the easiest way that people can do it is filling it out before their first meeting. Some people might just come to the first meeting if they've heard about it, but please ask them to fill out that missions application so they can continue on in the process. That's something that comes to me, and then I forward it out to you guys as they come in, so that way you'll have it. So if you encourage people to say, get your missions application in along with your first deposit, that's something that's kind of good to say together. But also one of the other big reasons, part of it, is our financial policy is attached to the application, so we just want to make sure people know as early as possible exactly where we kind of stand on how the finance process works, so there's no gray areas, that it's pretty clear. So encourage people to fill out the missions application. That's great for everybody to know what's going on with each person that goes on your trip. So that is something important. And the last thing I wanted to address is outreach. We, as many of you know, we really encourage leaders to have their teams do an outreach before you go on the mission field. That's something that's in the leader manual, and it gives you that option for one of your team meetings. And we really want to make sure teams are doing that together. It's just a very important thing to do before you're really doing that on the mission field. You can do that here. So big question people ask is how can they get involved and where do they see these options? We do have our categories listed for outreach on the website. So you can kind of get an idea of what options are out there, but most people already have connections for what they want to do and where they want to serve at whatever campus, and that's totally fine. But if you ever need any ideas or any thoughts, or if you just want to get the full list of outreaches that are available, you can definitely let me know. So that way it can be a communication piece for it. But also, it would be great if you could let me know anyway which outreach you're doing, because we want to give the leader of the outreach a heads up that you guys are coming. So if anybody is doing an outreach, Laura's nodding her head because she is an outreach leader. So it just helps them to know who's coming, especially if it's a smaller outreach, then all of a sudden a group is coming. So anybody let me know ahead of time so we'll get all that sorted. Plus, it's highly encouraged to wear your t-shirts, the serve shirts at outreaches, so we want to be able to get that kind of coordinated before you go. It's included in the cost of your trip, so that's something that you would get anyway, so we want to make sure you get that before you go to the outreach, so I can get that sorted out with you beforehand. So that's something that we want to just make sure everybody knows. Hope that wasn't too much. Any questions at all? Fabulous. Thank you.
I just wanted to address some FAQs that are kind of on the leadership side that kind of come up as I've been meeting with you guys, talking with you guys. One is raising up leaders for the following year. So on your trip recap form, and usually at the pre-departure meeting, hopefully I go over this. If I haven't, I'm sorry. Talk about like who could potentially lead the following year. Give them a chance to lead while on the field. You don't have to even mention, hey, I'm thinking about you to lead next year, but just give an opportunity to lead out in devotional, to lead out in prayer. Maybe there's something that you can delegate to them. It could just even be admin-wise, pre-trip, things like that. So when we're looking for mission trip leaders, a couple things that we're looking for is obviously just a heart for Jesus, a heart to serve. Hopefully it's someone that people like to be around. That's usually a good characteristic. We're not looking for like charismatic people, people who have that leadership gift. We're looking for teachability. So a great way to kind of test that is out in the field. Let's say you give them something to do, see how they did. If you give them feedback, see how they respond to that feedback. That will tell you how teachable that person is. So when you come back from the field, you'll fill out a leader recap form, and it'll say, who do you recommend to lead? And I kind of like to break that up into two groups, like one, who's ready to lead like tomorrow, and who's ready to lead maybe a year from now with some specific coaching that you have identified. So, and then basically we take their names, we put them in a fellowship one, which is our database group, and then we invite them to our missions leader training that following January. So if you've been on a trip and you've come back so far this year, if you could please get with those people you have recommended and then just let them know. I want their first point of contact to be you and not necessarily me since I don't know them yet, to just say, hey, I recommended you to lead a trip in the future. You'll be getting, communication from Debbie Heald. You can just go to the training and check it out. It doesn't mean if you go to the training you're in. It's just one of those things that if you're interested in knowing what the process is, that would be step one in the process. So it could be anyone on the team that, we'll work together on, I don't want to say screening, but screening people if they're ready to lead or not. So anyone that you've recommended, we've taken their name and we put them in the pot, so to speak. So for next year, because the goal is that for every trip that comes back, every trip has 2 leaders, so that you raise up a leader. So that's the part about leadership. Recruiting for your team. Okay, this comes up a lot. So I know for some people, for some teams, maybe they're not a ministry-driven trip. They have a lot less time to, or they don't have a platform to maybe get the word out there besides their pockets of people of influence that they've made along the way. So if you're having a hard time gathering people to your interest meeting, getting the word out there, please, please, please let me know. I'm here to help you, and I will help you get the word out. Just so you know, is like what's kind of our benchmark. Our benchmark for how many people are on a team is 12 people. That's what we aim for. That's including 2 leaders. So as you know, the more people you have on your team, the less cost it is for you, for example. But like with some trips like Greece, I think the cap was at 14 people. With Costa Rica, they can take up to like 30 or 40. Pastor John Scott, he's always said between 7 and 14 is good. So we'll kind of go around the 12 people mark. So we'll work together on that, but just so you know, and then just like as a rule of thumb, if you've got, 12 people, let's say 10 people at your interest meeting, chances are, 6 of them will actually come back and, bring a deposit. So obviously the more people you can have at that first meeting, the better. And again, if you need help in getting the word out, even if you're at a different campus, doesn't matter. I can help you coordinate that. So that was that, and then there's one thing I skipped. Okay, the difference between the interest meeting and meeting number 1. So in your manuals, I don't have one with me, but in your manuals, that first tab says meeting number 1. What I did, which I guess caused some confusion, is I kind of did away with the interest meeting language, only because it seemed like a lot of ministries, or let's say campus-focused trips, didn't necessarily need to have an interest meeting because it was already in their culture. Like, let's say, for example, Sisterhood, they maybe didn't need to have an interest meeting because they were already sharing what you would share at an interest meeting from the platform during announcements at Sisterhood. So basically, the interest meeting is optional. If you want to do it, great. If you don't need to do it, if you want to communicate that information already through your ministry, go for it. But it's basically optional to you guys. And then I think that's it. I did want to, oh my gosh, we're in the end downtown. I did want to give a chance for Jessica to share an update from Costa Rica, if you